So the BBC apparently is going to take a look into Jimmy Savile. The BBC are going to be the ones looking at Jimmy Savile, a man who worked for the BBC and was a nonce.
It's a shame that they're doing it now and not then.
Yeah, they could have
Then
done something.
now then.
Oh, for God's sakes. Maybe we shouldn't have brought the comedian on for this one. Anyway, so a lot of people may not know who Jimmy Savile is. I'm a bit too young for Jimmy Savile.
Well, do you want me to explain who Jimmy Savile is?
Well,
Jimmy Savile was he was one of the original DJs back when like music was invented. In the 60s, he was on like Radio Caroline, the ships they had in the off the coast of England, broadcasting to the UK. Then he became a Radio 1 DJ, and throughout this time, and he was also like previously worked as a nightclub bouncer and stuff like that. And he actually apparently he murdered people, and he confessed to these murders. He was never charged. I mean, he got away with a lot of stuff in his life. So noncing, obviously incredibly prodigious noncing. Also, so basically, it was when I sort of watched his shows, he'd become this sort of mainstay of Saturday night TV, and he always had children around him. He presented Top of the Pops, so he's always groping young women on that. You can see in the footage he's groping young women. And also he had Jim'll Fix It, where innocent children like me would write in and say, Jim, can you fix it for me to meet Superman or eat some noodles or whatever it was? And he'd call you into the studio, fix it for you, and then nonce you. So it's probably just as well that he didn't answer my letter. Although to be honest, when I was a kid, I was about 6'2", so I don't think he'd want to nonce me anyway. I'd be like an adult. Did
you actually write in?
Yeah, every child in the 80s wrote to Jimmy Savile.
God, that's weird.
And it's just so weird that he was, and like, so then it came to light that after he died, all these, I mean, there were allegations of his noncing before he died, but they weren't acted on. And people said afterwards, all these BBC employees were like, oh, but he was so powerful. It's like, he's not Godzilla. You know what I mean? He's not going to flatten Tokyo. He's just a sort of, an old weird guy. I'm sure you could find another old weird pedo-looking guy to present these terrible Saturday afternoon TV shows. You know what I mean? There's plenty of old weird pedo-looking guys out there.
I'm sure the BBC has their number. So
yeah.
Anyway, so just to get through some of that's a good explanation, but to hammer it down a little bit is just the first thing here, the first image being a timestamp from just one of the uploads on YouTube of Jim'll Fix It. As you can see, as you mentioned, always surrounded by kids, which is telling. And then if we go to his Wikipedia page, there's something I found funny on here, which is that he goes through his life, and then it has the honors and awards section, and there's the papal knighthood, which... boy, great embarrassment for the papacy there, who then, of course, apologized and said, yeah, we didn't know.
Yeah.
But he got away with it. The way it's argued he got away with it is from giving loads of money to charity and having high connections.
Yeah.
And would argue to anyone who would try and expose him that he'd get them fired and shut down and sued.
Yeah, and also that they'd be stopping all these millions of pounds going to, I think it was Stoke Mandeville Hospital. But I mean, it was really disgusting, the nonsense that he did. He was given the keys to the hospital, so he could just go in, and all the nurses and things knew about it.
We'll get into that, yeah.
Right,
but the fundamental thing being that the people at the BBC knew. And did nothing. Yeah. It's like, right, okay.
People in all the institutions knew. Politicians knew. He was a close friend of the royal family. I mean, when have they ever been connected to nonsense? I mean...
Grand Duke of York over there. Like,
yeah. And Rolf Harris as well. Pretty much anyone. If you spend 5 minutes in Buckingham Palace, you start nonsense.
I spoke to Carl beforehand because he's old enough for it as well. My understanding is like the public didn't really know. It was just the people who were connected to these institutions and whatnot. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. Although I think most mothers who watched would
be suspicious.
Yeah, Jim'll Fix It could tell that this weird guy who looked. I mean, because Jimmy Savile looked like, if you asked a 7-year-old to draw a paedophile from their imagination, they'd draw Jimmy Savile, this weird, long-haired, sort of Willy Wonka.
Speaking of which, let's get to this footage here just to show, and this is what you were describing earlier, which is him live on Top of the Pops groping some women. So he seems to grope the one next to him from the front, and then the one in front of him from behind as well, which is a thing. We'll just play this without sound, just to make the point. You can see her jumping there.
We're playing it without sound because we don't want to hear the terrible music they were playing.
Also just weird. But if you slow down the footage, and this guy, I think...
Oh, yeah, you can see her jump.
You can see her jump, and then his hand come around at the front, and then the other woman in front of him having to pull down her dress, and it looks like he's grabbing her ass as well. So it's a surprise to me that fewer people knew than probably should have, but whatever. So
But it was an open secret, and the BBC producers used to warn girls, not to be alone in a room with them or to be careful around them and stuff. But I don't know why they couldn't just get rid of him. You know what
Jesus
I mean?
Christ! I mean,
There's other terrible presenters out there.
oh, anyway, so we'll go into the reading I did just of the horrible stuff. So this is a Guardian article reporting on this 7 years ago, and this was an inquiry into the situation. Jimmy Savile's victims were aged 5 to 75 at Leeds Hospital, inquiry 5. So he wasn't just a nonce as in attracted to only children. Apparently he seemed to do this sort of stuff with anyone.
And also not just alive people, but he used to go down to the hospital mortuary. He had keys to that as well, and he'd nonce cadavers.
Anyway, so I don't know how to describe this, except maybe, I don't know, pansexual or something, but let's get into
That's very pansexual if you're like also including like dead people.
Well, I mean, it's like, pan includes everything, surely.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, traditionally, you don't have people marching in the Pride Parade, you know what I'm saying?
Well,
noncing cadavers.
Traditionally. 2030's Pride Parades are going to be interesting. So anyway, they say in this investigation, investigators say men and women and boys and girls were among the victims, and incidents included 3 rapes. Jimmy Savile's victims at Leeds General Infirmary ranged from 5 to 75 years old in age and included men, women and boys, blah, 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 blah. The Department of Health apologised on Thursday for the, quote, wholly inadequate procedures, putting it lightly, that followed the former BBC DJ to hold a managerial position at a high-security hospital in Broadmoor. The Department of Health accepts that the procedures in 1998 were wholly inadequate for checking whether Jimmy Savile was a suitable person to be given a managerial role. A literal nonce. Not suitable. At Broadmoor, in which Jimmy Savile had an association from 1968 for 3 decades and a managerial role from 1988, there were allegations made by 11 people, 6 of them patients, 2 of them staff, and 3 of them minors. 2 were male. Investigators believe this to be an underestimate of the true picture. Patients were strongly discouraged from reporting the abuse at the time and carry that legacy now, the report said. I mean, anything and everything, apparently.
Yeah.
Which also included kids, because the dude is also a nonce. So the investigation concluded that at least 5, possibly 6, had been sexually assaulted, but were unable to speak in detail to the other 5. Savile had keys to the high-security hospital, accommodation, and unrestricted access due to his relationship with the medical superintendent, who hoped his fame would improve public perception of the hospital. Well, that backfired, at least. He stopped visiting the hospital when a new security system was put in 2004. So all of a sudden, he wasn't interested in hanging around there because he'd be caught. Until the late 1980s, female patients were obliged to strip in front of staff and change into nightwear or to bathe. Savile watched and also looked through doorways at female patients bathing. The report states there was no reliable evidence that any staff or patients' complaints about Savile at the time were reported to senior staff. But the investigation found that there was a degree of underreporting because patients' concerns about consequences to themselves. So, yeah, I mean, that's how horrible as people are describing. And this is just in the hospital that he was allowed to roam around in, raping and noncing on people. It's ridiculous. I mean, then not to even go to the top of the pops, the BBC, as another place in which I imagine he did what he did. There's also the obvious point of why didn't people speak out? There are some people who apparently did a bit. So we have this guy here, Johnny Rotten, and this is an interview with Piers Morgan in which they have some old audio that was never released, apparently, in which Johnny Rotten in 1978 told the truth about Jimmy Savile, and, quote, I would like to kill Jimmy Savile. He's a hypocrite. I heard he's into all kinds of seediness that we all know about but we're not allowed to talk about. I bet this won't be allowed out. And that clip wasn't.
Yep.
And now has come to light again.
And David Icke as well. David Icke spoke out about Jimmy Savile. It was one of the things that is used to give credibility to David Icke because people say, well, he's right about Savile. And that obviously destroyed his
Alex
career
Jones
at the BBC.
and Jeffrey Epstein comes to mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, David Icke was he was a sportsman originally, and then he became a broadcaster on the BBC. So that destroyed his sporting career. Also, the comedian Jerry Sadowitz, Glaswegian comedian, incredibly funny. I think he's touring at the moment. But he had the start of a TV career, but he spoke out about Jimmy Savile, and he actually on Stuart Lee's TV show he dressed up as Jimmy Savile and was talking about being a nonce and stuff. So he came out and said, Jimmy Savile is a total nonce, and as a result of that, his career was it curtailed his career.
So there was some pushback if you did do the right thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the BBC is a cabal. It's an unaccountable cabal. I mean, I'm filming some stuff for them, so apart from that stuff's good. But everything else, but yeah, I mean, even as recently as 2014. So I was doing a show at the Edinburgh Fringe, a double header with my mate who's gay, and he had a BBC comedy commissioner basically sort of trying to use his position to get my mate to sleep with them, saying, "Oh, if you come to I love your stuff. Oh, you come to my hotel room so we can discuss it properly," and all this kind of stuff. Just really sleazily sort of Weinsteining him, and I thought that was pretty disgusting. That was in 2014. Long after the Jimmy Savile stuff had come out. So I think any institution that's got sort of unaccountable power, you've got these people who can completely control. I mean, obviously the proliferation of different media channels means that the BBC isn't all powerful anymore. But certainly in the 80s, there was only like 3 TV channels, and 2 of them were the BBC. So if you wanted to be anything in show business or entertainment, you had to keep the BBC sweet. So nobody's going to, come out and I mean, because you got to understand, in comedy and in entertainment and the media, everybody pretends to be a nice person, but they're absolute scumbags. Most comedians would let Jimmy Savile nonce their children to get a spot and mock the weak. And anybody who's actually got principles and speaks out against things, gets sidelined and blacklisted.
God, that's really making me think about the kind of new people you get on Mock the Week these days. Because a lot of the new folks on Mock the Week, especially, I just find particularly unfunny.
Yeah. But they've gone to a candlelit vigil and drank goat's blood with the BBC Comedy Commissioner, eating the head of a bat.
That's the standard, is it?
Yeah, that's what you've got to do. While other comedians stand around chanting.
Jesus. Anyway, so let's move on from that, because there was a lady who went on Question Time and spoke about this, and she gave her defense of why she didn't speak up, because she was old enough to be around in a senior position.
Is that Janet Street Porter?
Yeah, apparently she was there in a semi-senior position in the BBC, knew about this. She alleged in here, in this clip, we're not going to play it, but you can go watch it in your own time. She says that she knew of rumours, but then she goes on to say that she knew other people who knew for definite. So it's like, how does that work? Like, either if they know for definite, then you know for definite, surely, if you can take that word, but whatever. So she also says that she never did anything, and then one of the members of the audience is like, why? And she gives this defense, which is that at 10, she was molested by a hairdresser and her mother beat her in response. So if she had spoken up, this is the culture, no one would have taken me seriously. Not sure I buy that.
Yeah,
No.
I don't think her mum would have beaten her if she'd spoken up about Jimmy Savile. I think, once you're in a position of authority and you're an adult, people are going to...
The comparison she makes is like, well, it's a male-dominated area, no one would believe me as a woman. But I'm looking at like Johnny Rotten and whatnot, I'm like, well, you could have done something at least, surely.
Yeah, I don't know, the excuses seem a little flat. I mean, I don't know if like paedophilia and general noncing, necrophilia and stuff was just seen as more accepted back in the day. That seems to be how it is. And also certain segments of society, as we've seen with the Rotherham victims, working class girls are just seen, society just sees working class people as scum, and so it's almost allowed. Or they turn. I mean, if Jimmy Savile had been going around noncing, rich people's children in Highgate, then I think the authorities would have moved much more quickly.
Instead, he went to a psychiatric hospital.
Exactly, the most marginalised, the most, nobody's going to believe people in a psychiatric hospital. Look at Terminator 2.
There's another aspect of those comparisons that I find interesting, because a lot of people like to bring them up and compare them. The grooming gang situation is at least an imported situation. The tactics, the aspect of racial bigotry involved there, whereas this is, let's say, homegrown, but within the BBC specifically. I don't want them to get off on anything on this.
I think throughout the world, wherever people have real amounts of money and power and unaccountableness and power over other people, so they can make them shut up, they start noncing.
So let's move on just to make the point even more stark. So the next one is a Radio 1 DJ who said that the BBC management knew. So the idea that they don't is BS. And then we'll move on from this one and go to Steve Coogan's to play for the BBC as Jimmy Savile. So this is the main story, and why this was of interest to me is because the BBC, after going through this history of basically keeping this nonce under their hat, protecting him, covering up for him, are now going to do a drama about it. They're gonna be the ones in charge of the drama, the TV show. And I'm sure this is totally not going to be them trying to cover their arse. Because, who trusts them? Do you trust them, really, to do this? Of course not.
I trust Steve Coogan.
I do wonder why on earth he applied for that role.
Because he looks like him.
I'm not alleging he's a nonce or anything, but I just find it like, come on, man. Like, I'd rather play George Floyd than do that role. I feel like my career would have an easier time. But whatever. So the Alan Partridge star said that the decision to portray Savile on screen was not one he took lightly, but the series had a, quote, an intelligent script tackling sensitively an horrific story, however harrowing, needs to be told. I really don't think it needs to be told by the Beeb. I would have thought some other station would be more appropriate. Whatever. So the creators...
Channel 5.
I don't know, just not the Beeb. Like, not the place where he worked as a nonce.
Beeb Station.
Yeah. So the creators say that the series will explore both Savile's rise to fame and his final years, fighting rumors about his private life, exploring how the presenter, quote, used his celebrity and powerful connections to conceal his wrongdoings and hide in plain sight. Yeah, certainly did hide in plain sight by the looks of it. So aware from the potential for criticism that they are exploiting Savile's hundreds of victims, the makers of the drama, titled The Reckoning, say they have worked with some of those affected by the presenter's actions. So that's how they're defending themselves, as being like, we're going to do this properly. I still... go somewhere else, lads. Like, don't do it with the Beep, for Christ's sake. So when Savile died in 2011, he was initially widely celebrated as a quirky British eccentric who had entertained multiple generations of Britons through his appearances on BBC shows such as Top of the Pops and Jim Will Six It. Yet within weeks of his death, the BBC Newsnight programme had prepared an investigation into the allegations that Savile was a serial sexual abuser.
And to be fair, that's the BBC's Newsnight. It's, the BBC is...
Next line.
All right.
Only for it to be kept off air
Oh!
by BBC bosses.
Oops.
That's why I had to stop you there, because yeah, Newsnight did start doing it, and then the BBC bosses, who have been around for as long as Savile, let's say, and will have been implicated in probably part of the people who covered up and all the rest of it, didn't want that airing.
Well, yeah, I should imagine in Jimmy Savile's storage units, there's various Polaroids of BBC bosses that perhaps explain why they're so keen to cover it up.
Yeah.
I'm not implying that BBC bosses are all nonsense too. I'm explicitly stating it.
A year later, ITV went public with an investigation into the presenter, unleashing a cascade of allegations about an establishment cover-up. Rather than an eccentric, a pictured emerge of Savile as a paedophile who had covered up decades of illegal behaviour using his charity work, links with the police, and connections to the media. He protected his reputation by threatening legal action against anyone who looked into the allegations against him. So again, I mean, the Beeb set up the investigation. The bosses shut it down because they knew it would presumably embarrass them personally or reveal things. And they had to go to ITV to get it published. They had to go to the opposition to get
insane.
that done.
I mean, thank God we do have that that plurality of media in the UK.
But the point fundamentally being there, why the hell would you run a drama about his lifestyle with the people who not only covered up for years, but even after his death were trying to cover it up?
Well, at least the BBC bosses now are allowing it to be made.
Yeah, I suppose, but I don't trust that they're not going to have some kind of editorial control.
Yeah.
I'm suspicious of it, to say the least.
That's true. What's interesting about Jimmy Savile's fundraising, because apparently it was, he'd said he raised millions, but apparently he was just he was burnishing that, and it wasn't as lucrative as he said. But also he cheated. So he's famous for running marathons. He was always pictured in his like gold lammy tracksuit with a cigar, because obviously you can't participate in a sporting event without a large cigar. It just helps clear the lungs. But he cheated. He'd just jump in a taxi, or somebody would pick him up and drop him off near the end, and he'd just hop out.
I mean, if you're going to be a dishonourable person in all other aspects of life, I mean, why not? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically it wasn't the worst thing he did.
The only silver lining from any of this seems to be that if we go to the next one, Rolf Harris was also charged with abusing young boys, which the alleges seem to have been spurred on by the charges against, or the accusations against Savile.
Can you tell what it is yet?
Yeah. Also,
is it your thumb?
The next one we have Stuart Hall. Another guy who was convicted of this sort of thing.
So he's the guy who presented It's a Knockout. So he's famous for this booming voice and laugh. And it's sort of destroyed like all my icons from my childhood and my teenage years as well. So what's his name? John, the Radio 1 DJ, John Peel. John Peel apparently not
I have no idea who that is.
this level of nonsense, but he married a 15-year-old, and he was in the 60s, 70s. He was quite noncy.
Right. So there's that silver lining, I guess. But if we go on from this,
Why is it a silver lining?
the other people did get convicted.
Right.
The guys came out against Savile, and then subsequently these two guys at least were taken down as well, rather than it all just swept under the carpet. So if we go to the next one, we have the Aldi Reporting, and this is a guy who apparently is the one who spent all his time going after Savile and getting the information in the public eye. So he gives a summation about this, and you can go give his full account. But he says there are 3 cover-ups in his mind. So the abandoning of Newsnight's film was cover-up number 1. The Pollard inquiry clearing the BBC Director General Mark Tomlinson was the second cover-up, because apparently he had been told about this and then was just denying it in this inquiry, and then the inquiry believed him for God knows what reason. And also Chris Patton, at the time the head of the BBC Trust, is responsible for a cover-up number 3 for threatening someone who sent him evidence of the abuse. So he was sent evidence, and then he was like, yeah, I'm going to sue you. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I'm actually so it's that bad. It's that systemic, and that's why there should be absolutely no trust, I think, of the handling of this. And if I was the guys directing it, I would go elsewhere.
Yeah.
But let's move on.
Systemic noncism.
Yeah, just for the last couple of things here, which is not a great organization, which is why they're giving the Director General a £75,000 pay rise.
And that's a pay rise. That's not his salary.
No,
you know what I mean? That's on top of the salary he was getting before.
Not alleging he has any involvement in the Savile story, because I think he's newly appointed and whatnot.
Yeah.
But God knows.
No, and Tim Davie.
Yeah.
Apparently wants to get me in some. So Tim Davie, great guy, deserves all that money. Deserves it.
Tim Davie pay jumps to £525,000, almost 3 times as much as the Prime Minister, amid the broadcaster's cost-cutting measures. So they decided to increase his salary. And I can't even be mad at him personally for this.
No.
Because the stupid thing is, it's fundamentally a problem with the organisation. Because as we've said before, and we'll make the point, the reason this is pay rise probably taking place is because of an embarrassment about another person who gets paid far too much. So if we go to the next one, we have the Daily Mail reporting June Sarpong, the £267,000 a year job for 3 days a week, which if it was 5 days a week would be 445,000.
Yeah.
So this was reported, and they showed that Tim was making less than her because
Yeah.
she's the diversity and inclusion officer.
I mean, this is just ridiculous because this is a publicly funded organization. It's not paid for by taxes, but it's paid for by a levy on all
Basically a
homes.
tax.
Yeah, it's basically a tax. And yeah, although apparently under the current government, so the one good thing that the Tories have done is you can't be prosecuted for non-payment of TV license.
Have they passed that?
I'm not sure if it's been passed, but I mean, I haven't paid my TV license in like 15 years or
I've never
something.
paid it.
They came to the door once. We got all these letters, and then they came to the door, and I just opened the door. I was really hungover. I was in my underpants. And opened the door, and the guy's like, you don't have a TV license. And I'm like, yeah, just use the TV for watching DVDs. Like, come on in, I'll show you. And he like took a look at me. He's like, no, I'll just put it on the phone. So that's, if you want to know how to get away with not paying your TV license, you just got to answer the door hungover in your underpants.
But anyway,
no bra.
There's the point, which is that the solution to her getting overpaid was apparently just to overpay the guy even more. And I just thought, no, just fire June Sarpong and the entire diversity
But
department.
then
and
who
save
will
yourself
make
the money.
sure that they have enough diversity and equity at the BBC? Because it's very important. Because at the moment, it's,
don't need
I
that.
haven't seen any. I haven't noticed any.
They need an
people who aren't
anti-nonce
white men.
department, not an anti-diversity department.
Man, the thing with all these diversity and inclusion coordinators. By the way, my mate was at Davos, and he told me a funny story. Like this, they've got a diversity and inclusion zone at Davos, and June Sarpong's in there like drinking, Veuve Clicquot or whatever, and it's like that's you can't get more just absolute privilege than these people are complaining about privilege.
Diversity zone.
Yeah,
Literally segregated off.
Yeah, 100%. It's ridiculous.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go over to lotuseaters.com to subscribe to get access to all the premium content we have.
The way the site works is that you have bronze, silver and gold tier subscriptions. The bronze being £5 a month and allows you to get access to all of the premium content and leave comments on the articles. And we've got a new feature for the silver tier, and the silver and gold tier, which is having all of the premium articles accompanied by an audio track of a very smooth British voice reading, as you can see on the screen there. It's only an 11-minute listen, or it's however long it takes you to read the article. So that's for convenience. So that's for gold and silver members. And we've also got all of our regular great content, which we're all really proud of. I mean, the premium podcast we have here is Progressing to Destruction, where that's just a lot of work where it went into examining exactly what the consequences of mass immigration have been in Britain. And this was a great deal of effort to put together, and we didn't really want it being taken down from YouTube or anywhere else, so we're hosting it on our site, and we're very pleased with, well, what is, I suppose, a bit of a negative response, but not because of anything we've done, but because of the facts of the matter, it seems. But we also do various other premium podcasts, like The Contemplations, such as Are There Human Rights? Well, it depends on whose definition of what a human right you are using is. And of course, we do our regular history podcast called Epochs. This week's was The Sea People, the Terror of the Bronze Age. I really enjoyed doing this one because there was a great collapse about 3,000 years ago of the entire economy of the Eastern Mediterranean, and it seems that a bunch of piratical raiders may have been partially responsible for that, and possibly inspired the Trojan cycle from Homer. So we discussed that in that. And of course, we do our book club. For some reason, I decided that we'd highlight the George Orwell ones that we've been doing. So we've got his Road to Wigan Pier, and of course, the classic 1984. And I'll probably do Shooting an Elephant next. Have you ever read that?
Not heard of it.
It's really interesting. It's about George Orwell's time as a colonial administrator and police officer in Burma. And at one point in his narrative, an elephant goes on the rampage in a village and is killing people and destroying houses. So he has to go down and shoot it. And it is an absolutely fascinating look at the sort of colonial dynamics. The reason I haven't done a book club this month so far is because I'm currently going through the Critical Race Theory Bible. As you can see, it's 500 pages long, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through. And there are going to be many very in-depth book clubs coming out of that, because the things they believe are crazy and conservatives need to know about them.
But anyway, if you'd like access to all that premium content, please go over to lotuseaters.com, subscribe. Thank you.